This happened when I was just 20 years old, and my name is Robin. I will make a brief backstory that would eventually lead up to all this craziness that happened. I just turned 20 and I decided it was time for me to move out from my parents' house. And they were actually proud of me to take this decision. For the past 2 years, since I was 18, I have been working at the local Walmart. And I have been saving enough money to find my own place. And I was choosing from an apartment or an actual house. And with my parents' help, we actually found a small, cozy home not far from my work, and it was also not that far from my parents' house. And when we went to this house for a view, and I immediately fell in love with the house. And the neighborhood was actually really pleasant. The neighbors seemed to be well well loved. There were a few young families and some older people in the neighborhood as well. And the price for this house was not that much and was enough decent for me to decide this is the house I wanted. My parents was just happy and proud that I had took the next step in order to get my independence and try to make something myself for once. After a while, I had moved into the house and I actually loved the house. It was decent small size for just a single person, but I didn't mind. It was cozy. And for the next couple of days after I had moved in and settled down, I actually met my next door neighbor to my right, George. He was like 10 years older than me, but he was actually really pleasant. Actually, I did meet him the first time when I started moving in and would help my parents. He actually offered to help me and my parents to carry some boxes, and my dad actually said sure. And I actually had a decent compensation with him when I was moving in. He said that he had been living in this neighborhood for the past few years, and I was like, at least I have a neighbor that seems to be pleasant, even though he's a little bit older than me, but someone that actually I can probably get used to have a conversation with, maybe invite over from time to time. And I was like, this was really pleased. He was a nice guy, quite handsome, even though he was just 10 years older. And even though I seemed that he might like me, but I wasn't attracted towards him, not because that he wasn't my type. It's because I prefer just someone that's around close to my own age. And shortly after I had started moving in, things started acting like normal. I mean, I had a very started to be developing good relationship with my neighbors, like friendly terms, and it's just a great time. Even my best friend Serena, who was also from time to time showed up to my place, and she also loved the house. And it happened that she did spend the night from time to time, but things started to acting a little bit strange because one night, it has been at least about a month after I moved in, when I started hearing this tap 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 sound at my bedroom window. I was like, maybe it was just a bug, or maybe there's a tree that was standing outside that was making the branches touch the window. So I thought to myself, I maybe had to cut down some of the branches so it doesn't reach the window. But I didn't pay much attention, and this didn't happen every single night. At least it happened a few times in a week. But at work, some of my coworkers, like Martin, was a close friend that I have been worked with for the past 2 years, and he was also 20 years old, and he was actually a cool dude. He was a cool guy. He actually asked me what I liked of my house so far. I said, "Yeah, it's actually very pleasant. The neighbors are nice. Even there is not much crimes happening in the area, though." I laughed, and he said, "Well, as long as you like the place, doesn't mean that you don't have to move out." Yeah, I mean, even if I didn't have to move out, I'm more likely would have moved back to my parents for a short time. Yeah, let's hope that won't happen. But when I got home that same day, I actually saw George was outside on his front porch, just sitting there drinking a beer or something, what it was, I don't know. He actually asked me to come over, which I did. We actually started to have a good conversation, and I said I had to take care of something, so I left. After I got home, I put down my things and went outside the backyard to look at a tree that was just near my bedroom window. Sure enough, the branch was close enough that it could make this tapping sound. So I went inside to get this some of the tools and cut some of the tree branches a few inches away from the window. So I thought, okay, now that problem is taken care of. But the same night, I woke up around 10 p.m. I usually go to bed around 8 p.m. I heard it tap, 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 tap again, repeatedly. And I was like, how in the world is it even possible for a tree to tap the window when I cut off some of the branches, or at least a part of it? So, but it didn't repeat, or maybe just one more time, then it stopped. I was like, okay. So I went back to sleep, and nothing actually happened. And a couple of days after that, George, one day when I was out for to get my mail at my mailbox, he walked up to me and asked how I liked the neighborhood so far. And I have been living in this house now, but for maybe almost 2 months. And so far, actually, I loved it. Then he asked me if I would like to go out with him. I was like, sorry, George. I'm I'm pleased that you like me, but I'm afraid that you're a little bit too older than I usually would go. He had actually a smile at first, but it led to like almost a frown. Oh, he said. Well, how about you and I just go out, maybe not a date, but let's just, go somewhere, grab something to eat or drink. My treat. I thought, why not? I mean, if he offered to just go somewhere to just grab and eat or drink, and he actually took me to a local bar that I heard of from some of my coworkers, and I actually had such a good time. And as we were sitting there, once again, he started talking about himself, that he had been living in that neighborhood for quite a while, and he then tried to put his hand on mine, and I removed my hands and said, George, I'm sorry to tell you this. I'm sorry. You're attractive, but I only I feel don't the same. I don't feel the same thing for you. Turns out that George had been having developing a small crush on me since I moved in, but I tried to try to telling him that I wasn't much attracted to him, and it would never happen because due to the fact the age difference. He felt a little bit mad, but he said, "I understand. I understand." So after we went home, I wanted to watch some TV. I was thinking about this evening how George is to be persistent, that he really wanted to be with me. But that same evening or the same night, I heard this tap, 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 almost like 4 times. And now I know for certain this is not a tree branch. Because, first of all, it wasn't even windy that night. So as I was just walking up to the window, I heard it tap, tap, tap. But as I was getting closer, the floorboard creaked, and suddenly, mid of the tap, like tap, tap, it stopped, and I heard this crunching sound outside my window. Now, I know for sure it was someone out there. But who? As I opened the blinds, I tried to look out, but I didn't see anything. I saw that my neighbor George's house was dark, so it wasn't even him. Well, at least I thought it was not him, because that would have been weird and creepy. Why would he still standing outside my bedroom window for so many times, tapping the window? He couldn't even see in because the blinds was down. So I brushed it off. And at work, Martin asked me how things has been going for me so far because he did notice I was a little bit distant. So I told him that this strange tapping sound on the window. I was like, yeah, this keep me up sometimes. He asked me if this happened every single night at the same time. And I told him no, it happens just at random points, random times, but almost at the same time, like 10 or 12 at night. It doesn't seem to be in it. And he asked if there was a tree. I said, I do have a tree outside my bedroom window, but I had cut down some of the part of the branch so they wouldn't even repeat, so they wouldn't touch my window. And sometimes when it were this tapping, there was no wind outside. He thought maybe, well, what if there's a crazy person that's trying to scare me or something? That kind of a little bit made me unworried, a little bit unnerved. How or who would even do it? I thought maybe George, but it didn't seem that he was that type of person that wanted to do it. I mean, he was always polite and always helpful around when I needed help. But I brushed it off and maybe thought maybe it was someone else, maybe another a neighbor kid that was just trying to mess around with me or something. But he then asked me something. He asked me if I would like to go out with him for to the movies on Fridays. I was a little bit taken aback, but since Martin was actually quite cute, if I had to admit to that, and I said yes. So we decided to go out as an official date. But I did mention this only to one person, Serena. I was actually this would happen when I get home from work the same day. I was actually in the kitchen talking to Serena on the phone, like telling her that me and Martin was going on a date. She was actually quite excited, since I hadn't been in any formal relationship since high school. I never went to college. Well, at least I thought about it first, but never did. And she was happy for me. But what I didn't know, the next day was a Friday. Well, as a first day. I've just before I was good had to go to work, I actually saw George. I waved to him, but he looked at me and looked kind of mad and just turned around and walked back inside with his mail. I was like, well, look, someone has a bad day so far, so I didn't mind. And later that same afternoon, or later that evening when I got home from work, I didn't see George at all. Since he usually is sitting by his on his front porch drinking a beer or just sitting there to enjoy the day. This was during the summertime though, and he wasn't even sitting at all, so I thought and his car wasn't even at home. So I thought, okay, he wasn't at home. So I went in and I just took care of my day, and the next day I went to work as normal, and when I got home I was getting ready for my date with Martin, and I was actually looking forward to this first date in a while since high school though. And we actually had a very decent, good time at the movies. We actually choose an action movie since I actually love to actions. And it was a great time. We even went to a small diner afterwards just to grab something to eat and we talked about the movie. And he took me home and I actually gave him a kiss and he asked me if I would like to go out again a couple times. I said, sure, why not? I mean, since I had a good time with him and he's has always been a polite even off work and at work. So if we choose a restaurant the next time and I actually had such great time and after that Martin had drove away, I saw that George was on his front porch. This was around 7 p.m. So he walked up to my house and he asked if I had a good time with my date. I was like, first, how did he even knew that I was on a date? But assuming maybe that when he saw Martin, maybe he thought about that. So I said, yeah, I actually had a good time, and we are actually going on our second date soon, I hope. I said with a big smile. Oh, um, I didn't know you were, I never thought you were much in for guys though. I mean, well, I told him that Martin was actually 20 years old as myself, and we were actually co-workers. He looked a little bit surprised, but he said, alright, I hope you have a good time. And then he would turn around and went back inside. I just like to brush it off and just went back not inside my own door. For the next several of weeks after the first date with Martin, me and Martin has been start dating a little bit more, and it wasn't until like maybe after 2 months we were when we made it official. I was so excited to have an official boyfriend now. And it happens that Martin actually came by to my house from time to time and even spent the night. And I started to see York a little bit more often. And in fact, he started to come up to my house from time to time. But one day, when I was at home, this was during the weekend, I actually had a doorbell ring. I was like, who can that be? This was early noon, and there was some sort of delivery boy outside my house, and he gave me a bouquet of flowers. I was like, I didn't order any flowers, but he said someone actually did. I and he said that's already been paid, and he then left. I took the flowers in, and I noticed there was a card among the flowers. I was like, perhaps it's actually from Martin. That was a sweet gesture. So I read the card to my sweet, loving lover girl, signed Secret Admirer. Why would he write Secret Admirer when he's already my boyfriend? But I thought it was a sweet gesture, and I put the flowers in the kitchen. I never much did even call them or text them about the flowers. But the next week, when I went back to work, I actually almost forgot about the flowers when I asked him about them, and he looked confused at me like, flowers? I didn't send you flowers this weekend. I was like, what? Then, if it wasn't him, then who could it have been? Maybe it was Serena, but then she only had a boyfriend, and she wasn't much into girls at all, and I was into myself. So who could it have been? Not my parents, I'm for certain about that also. And so I brushed it off, and I almost forgot about it. And like in a couple of weeks later, when I got this time, when I opened the door, it was a teddy bear holding a, a heart. When it was next to it was a box of chocolate. Okay, now this is getting a little bit strange because I know that my boyfriend would not have been doing this, and I really had curious who could have been doing this. And also, the tapping sounds out my window actually still also have been going on. But this time, I had decided to wait by the window to see who can actually have been. When I saw this figure in a in a hoodie, and as it since it was dark out, and I didn't want to be in, and this figure saw I looked at him, and he was really scared and ran off, but I couldn't see from where direction he left though. I know there was it was a guy, but based on the height, he seems to be it looked to be maybe around at least older than myself. I started to get scared. When I told Martin about this, he started getting a little bit worried. It seems I had a stalker or some stalker with having this secret admirer obsession about me, and I was getting worried if I should do something. And I did had told them about this first about the flowers and the teddy bear with the chocolate. I was like, what else should I do? And I even had informed Serena and my parents. They were all getting worried about me. Serena suggested I should move out from the house and move in with Martin, or even move back to my parents for some time. But I was like, I don't have the money to just move out. And if I wouldn't want to find moving with Martin, that will be difficult because he lived in a small apartment. And it wouldn't be been big enough for both of us. And I don't want to move out since I love this house. This stalker should not have been forced me to move out from the place where I live and love. So, what else did I do? Well, me and George, we did talk about some things about it. Some of the options about this we talked about was either getting a ring doorbell camera, or if he should move in with me permanently as my, well, but we hadn't even been dating that long, maybe just almost 2 months or so, and we decided that was not an option. But I told him that would have been a sweet idea. But maybe when if we had been together longer, maybe. But he's always allowed to stay at my place for the weekend if he wanted to. But the ring doorbell camera was another thing I could do. So I decided why not. So I actually asked my dad for help with that. And he bought me one and had it installed. And I actually had an app on my phone so I could see who's getting to my door if I was not at home or if I was in bed or something. For the next several days, things went back to normal. But the tapping at my window hadn't even stopped. It only had continued and continued. But this is now almost like it started happening way earlier, sometimes around 9 p.m. or even 10 p.m. or as even 1 in the morning. I was getting a little bit scared, and I had told George about this strange occurrence around my house at sometimes middle of the night to different points, different times. He did look very much concerned about this events, and he told me that he will make have an eye open over this from his window, or have at least keep an eye open to see if there's any strange behaviors or strangers around in the house. But he never told me if he had never saw any. Though I did ask, but he said no, nothing at all. Not other than except the neighbors, the mailman, or your boyfriend, or your parents, or yourself, but none of the strangers. And the doorbell, which the gifts had also suddenly stopped. Because I did tell George that I had this the ring doorbell camera, and he looked, wow, really? Yeah, he turns out he knew about those, but and from that part, it suddenly all those gifts stopped. So I was really curious who could it have been? I mean, I did try to ask the delivery service who actually put the flowers, but they couldn't give me any information since it was part of their um, policy not to be giving out any of their clients' names or numbers or anything like it. So and that's understandable. But at least those gifts stopped. But I was still getting worried. Who can this been? Who could have been doing this to me? Because I don't know. I had even asked around in the neighborhood for anyone knows, but no one has said anything about it. I was really getting a little bit nervous and scared for the most part. The tapping had just continued, but one day when I actually had Martin over to watch a movie and having a cozy movie night date that we had planned for, I was actually I heard this tap 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 tap, this time from the window behind us. I looked, but I saw nothing. And there was no tree there. Even Martin didn't notice, but he said, just don't bother. It's probably a bug or something. And that happens too also. But the tapping continued, and suddenly, when I just turned around, I saw quickly a figure ducking down. I was looked scared, but I pretended to be I didn't notice. But I whispered to Martin, like, there is someone outside the window. And he looked at I was serious. Shall we do something? Maybe you can pretend to go to the kitchen to get some more popcorn, and maybe you can sneak out the back door and see if you can be in? He nodded and said, well, I should get some more popcorn. This movie is getting it's long, and I want to enjoy more some snacks. So he went to the kitchen, and he did make some popcorn, but he opened the back door window, the back door. As he was just looked around the corner, he saw this guy in a hoodie, but this guy saw Martin and took off before even Martin could do anything. Martin was like, he would now believe anything was something was getting on here. I was really curious, but also very much terrified, and I was worried. Marty was actually getting a bit hesitant to allow me to be thinking maybe I shouldn't stay here anymore. So I decided to move back with my parents for only temporarily, just for a few days, to see if things had happened. And nothing did happen. I did get a notification on my phone about someone was at the front door, and I looked. It was George. I asked him if he needed something, and he noticed. It told me that I hadn't. He said, "I haven't seen you in a while. What are you?" I told him about my parents' place for a few days, just to help around. And he said, "Okay, it's just been worried. I was just curious. I said, I haven't seen you." So he said goodbye and went home. I started being questioning myself. What if it was actually George the whole time? Like, what if he actually was the guy who was in this hoodie making tapping from my bedroom window and the living room window, and also the one who could make these gifts? But without any actual information from the delivery service, I would have been unable to answer that. But I eventually would get my answers because one day I actually opened my door and I did notice that this strange package outside my door, and it had a letter inside with another small gift. It was actually a love letter, a love note. Said, dear Rob, I love you ever since I first saw you. I will want to be with you, but you have been rejecting me so many times. I wish that we can just move away, and be together, start a family. Yours serious, sincerely, G. I have it proven now. It was George. Even if it was only spelled with a G. I showed this to Martin, and now he was really convinced this was actually George. But still, he didn't deliver this package to himself directly. It was the mailman. He told me that without doubt, it's George. But we needed some more evidence. So me and Martin decided to pretend that we had this argument and that it was over between us. So next few days, Martin came over and we had a normal conversation by the door, but then ended up having this heated conversation. And he's like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, really?" And he's like, "Martin, I'm done. I'm done with you. It's over between us." And he just, huh, right. Then turned around and walked angrily to his car and just took off. And after only a few minutes, as we were expected, George would step out of his house and he looked at me and asked, "Whoa, what is that about? Are you okay?" Well, to be honest, we were laughing. We were outside on my front porch and we were loud, so any reasonable mind, any reasonable neighbor would, of course, came out and ask if something was wrong. I told them that me and my and Martin had this conversation which led to this argument, and well, I just dumped him because turned out he was cheating on me with another girl, and he was like, "Oh, oof, that hurts." You know, if you want to talk, yeah, I'm always here for you. Thanks, but I prefer to be alone today. He nodded and went back inside. Now the plan was set. We were expecting to have more evidence. And I told George that I had also removed my doorbell, but I hadn't, but pretended that it was gone, and sure enough, my plan was now set for the second phase. catching George, the one who'd been doing this. And I also have put a camera at my bedroom window with night vision. That camera was actually Serena's idea. With night vision, now we can able to see who it has been tapping my window. Sure enough, the same night I had actually the camera pointing directly at my window, and around 10 p.m. I heard it tap 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 repeatedly for a few minutes. And I didn't what this person didn't know has been recorded. And the next few days, I actually saw someone putting some flowers at my front door, and sure enough, it was George. Now I have the evidence, and clearly, so I took with this information to Martin, show him it was George the whole time. He had been stalking me because I rejected him because he was in love with me, but I would not have given him a chance because I told him because there was 10 years of age difference between us. And sure enough, when I went over to George's house the same day, well, the same afternoon, he was like smiling. Oh, hey, Robin, well, do you want something? And I told him that I want him to stop tapping my window every single night ever since I moved in. And he was like, he tried to deny that was even him. But I showed him on my phone with his face in the hoodie with a night vision, and his smile dropped. And I told him I even had a video of him putting the flowers by my front door because I told him I lied to you about my doorbell was gone, and I was still there, and he has like almost forgot about it. And didn't try to deny this. I told him I don't want to see you around my house anymore. Please, you had to know I'm not gonna date you because I'm still with Martin. When he heard that, he lost his mind and screamed at me from lying to him about this. But I told him I did that because we wanted to catch you on doing this because this is stalking and it is not okay because it's not against it is against the law. And he tried once again to deny that was even him on the camera. And that was someone else that looked like him. Because in first he confirmed it was him, but now he denies it was him. I told him, no matter what you do, this will not be good for you. I actually left his house and went straight to police, and I showed them the video camera. This is the footage I had on my phone, and I even told them about the times when he had been tapping at my window, and even about the time I saw this stranger, which now confirmed was actually George the whole time. And they actually believed me, despite that I had this evidence. They drove to his house and they have a serious conversation with him. And he was actually mad at first that I did this, but couldn't anyone blame me? I was I was just a 20-year-old girl living next door to a guy who was 10 years older than me. And when I told the police the reason why he started doing this because I rejected him because I didn't want to be with him, didn't want to date him since he was like 10 years older. It was not because that I felt no attractions, and he should have respected my wishes. And even when they asked Martin, my boyfriend, about the about the times that he actually saw the stranger outside my door, outside my window, my living room window, and he confirmed that the description of the height and the build of the person looked exactly as the one that I did capture on my camera. And the police told George to leave me alone, and only about a week later after this event, he moved out. He literally moved out and he didn't even look at me. And I was like, I was screaming of joy inside. Like, now my creepy next door neighbor is gone. And only a few weeks later, another person or people moved in the house, this time a young family. I welcomed them to the neighborhood, and well, I did give them a brief backstory of what happened. The previous neighbor and the mother, she was concerned but at least happy that that guy is no longer around. And in fact, even get a restraining order against George. Well, that was the last time I even heard or even saw George in town. And a few months later, Martin actually moved in with me. And that is one choice I never regret. Because he and the next door neighbor to us, the father, they actually turned out to be old friends. And what small world. And I only like when I was, and now me and Martin, 1 year later, had now actually got married when I was just 21-year old, and now we had a baby on the way, and I cannot be more excited to have this amazing, handsome man in my life. And George, if you're hearing this story, please stay away from me ever again because this string order doesn't bother me at all. You were the most creepiest neighbor I ever had encountered. In the beginning, you were really polite, but I realize now it was just a disguise, as always. So, George, thank you, but no thank you.